Hi folks, HR Funk here, with a trio of firearms from Smith & Wesson that all fall under the heading of Combat Magnum, or at least that's the moniker they were given in 1955 when this particular design first saw the light of day. Now for those of you that might be unfamiliar with the history of the 357 Magnum cartridge, it was originally developed in 1935 as a more powerful duty round for law enforcement officers. If there was a problem with that early release of the 357 Magnum, it was not with the ammunition, but with the firearms it was chambered in. Actually, I shouldn't say a problem. What I should say is an issue, and it was not with the cartridge itself. The 357 Magnum was and still is a very good cartridge. These days it's not used nearly as much by law enforcement officers, but still for defensive applications, for hunting, for general shooting, 357 Magnum is a superior cartridge, especially when it's chambered in a revolver or even in a pistol caliber carbine such as the Marlin 1894. But I digress. In any regard, the issue with that early carry of the 357 Magnum was with the size and weight of the revolvers. The 357 Magnum cartridge was originally chambered in Smith & Wesson's end-frame revolver, and eventually it became known as the Model 27. The Model 27 is a fine revolver, but it is large and it is somewhat heavy. For about 20 years, police officers who opted to carry the 357 Magnum used a variation of the Model 27. Most notably, the FBI adopted a 3.5-inch version of the Model 27, or at that time was just called the 357 Magnum revolver. It wasn't until 1957 that Smith & Wesson revolvers got model number designations. In any case, about 20 years later, in 1955, with the advances in heat treatment that was applied to the metal in the revolvers, Smith & Wesson decided to chamber their K-frame revolvers, their medium-sized frame revolvers, for the 357 Magnum. And what they came out with was a very fine, very carryable revolver chambered for the powerful 357 Magnum cartridge. That was known at the time of its introduction as the Combat Magnum. 2 years later, that revolver became known as the Model 19. When the Combat Magnum first saw the light of day, it was manufactured with a 4-inch barrel length. Interestingly, that's the only size that I don't have represented here, is the 4-inch model. Again, it was intended for a law enforcement carry revolver. The 4-inch barrel made it very handy, very carryable, and balanced very well. As the years passed and that particular revolver became more popular, it was offered in other barrel lengths. I have with me here today a 3-inch Model 66, which is the stainless steel version of the Combat Magnum, a 2.5-inch Model 19, and also a 6-inch Model 19. And we'll look at these all three a little bit closer here in just a moment. Before we look at the revolvers, I want to address a bit of a criticism that has been cast at the Combat Magnum over the years, that being that it is somewhat fragile when it receives a steady diet of full-power 357 Magnum ammunition. There is some basis for that criticism, but still, I have never worn out a Combat Magnum. I've heard stories about broken forcing cones and one thing and another. I think you would have to either fire many, many rounds of full power ammunition through one of these revolvers to have a problem, or maybe if you were using exceptionally high-powered hand loads, that might cause them to wear more quickly. But when these revolvers, or when this design rather, was first manufactured, the intention was that it would be shot in practice by law enforcement officers most of the time with .38 special ammunition, which is perfectly safe to fire in these revolvers, and then carried with full power 357 Magnum ammunition. Over the time that these revolvers were used by law enforcement officers, the philosophy and training changed, and it became conventional wisdom to use ammunition of the same power for training that you were going to carry on duty. Reason being, if officers had to deploy their firearm on duty, the recoil impulse would be the same thing that they were used to from training. When that shift happened and police officers started firing many, many rounds of .357 Magnum ammunition through their revolvers. Eventually, the complaints about wearing of the revolvers and some damage occurring started to come to light. Still, today, with the K-frame Magnums, if you shoot them with .38 special ammunition most of the time, with an occasional load or two of .357 Magnum ammunition, you're never going to have a problem with these. This particular revolver has only ever fired .357 Magnum ammunition, full power .357 Magnum ammunition. Now, I've not fired many, many, many rounds through it, but I fired it a fair amount, and it's still in pretty much the same condition today as it was the day I bought it. So I think the rumors about the Combat Magnum, the Model 19 and the Model 66, being damaged from full power .357 Magnums or wearing out prematurely with the use of .357 Magnums was way overblown, and probably overblown largely by some competitors of Smith & Wesson's trying to tout the strength of their revolvers that they were manufacturing while casting some aspersions at Smith & Wesson. Age-old marketing practices here in the good old USA. In any case, again, I've never worn one of these out. I don't know of anybody that's ever worn one out. But if you're worried about that and you want to fire .357 Magnum ammunition all the time and you're afraid you're going to damage one of these or wear it out, the solution to that problem ultimately was the Model 686, which is a slightly larger frame than the K-frames and a stronger revolver that can take that steady diet of full power .357 Magnum ammunition. So with all that out of the way, let's take a look at these revolvers and see what they are. First up is my 2.5-inch Model 19. This is the most carryable of the three, and it is a fine, fine revolver. I added a Tyler T-grip to it. I added some fancy grips that I got from Smith & Wesson just to guss it up a little bit. But at its heart, this is just a plain Model 2.5-inch rather, Model 19, 6-shot, .357 Magnum revolver. Again, this thing has digested a steady diet of .357 Magnum ammunition during the time I've owned it and suffered no ill effects whatsoever. This revolver balances very nicely. It, along with being able to carry it easily with the 2.5-inch barrel, when you go to shoot it, it balances, it feels good in your hand. It still maintains the adjustable sights of the Model 19. Some people criticize those as being fragile, and if you bang them, they're going to be knocked off or whatever. Again, I've never had that issue. If you're worried about it, look for a Model 13 that has the fixed sights. Some people worry more about things than I do, I guess. And again, I've never had a problem with these sights, never had a problem with these revolvers. The 2.5-inch model, if you're going to be carrying it, particularly concealed all the time, is probably your best route to go. Oh, and by the way, I'm not entirely sure Smith & Wesson is still manufacturing the Combat Magnum. I know for a while they went away. I'm not sure if they brought them back in the classic line or not, but there are lots and lots of these out there on the used market. You can usually pick them up pretty reasonably. Next up is the Model 66. This is a 3-inch variation, which is, I don't think 3-inch was ever a standard catalog barrel length for the Model 66 revolvers. They've manufactured small lots of them from time to time. This is probably my favorite one of the three. It is about as carryable as the Model 19, but it gives you a slightly longer sight radius, slightly better balance. This one I did send away to Magnaport International and had the porting in the barrel just to keep down the muzzle flip a little bit when I'm shooting it with full power 357s. As I say that, I should probably point out that shooting 357 Magnums through these is fine, but it's also perfectly acceptable and a lot of fun to shoot them with 38 specials. Whether you're practicing, whether you're plinking, whether you're hunting for small game, 38s are very pleasant to shoot in these. And unless you need the power of the 357 Magnums, shooting 38s in these is a lot of fun and is perfectly fine. Again, the 3-inch Model 66, my favorite one of the bunch. I can't really criticize any of these revolvers for anything. The round butt on the 2.5 inch and the 3-inch model fits my hand very well. It conceals a little bit better than the square butt. And again, just very good packable, useful revolvers is, I guess, probably the best thing I can say about them. Last up is the 6-inch Model 19. This one, if you were going to be carrying this in the field, whether maybe you were going to use it for some sort of hunting, or maybe a little bit longer range shooting where you want a little bit greater sight radius, that would help you out with this particular variant. Also with this one, and I don't know how many of these that might have been made this way, it has the target trigger and the target hammer on it. So if you wanted to do a little bit more precision shooting, this one is set up a little bit more for that. I don't think I would use it with full power 357 Magnums in some sort of target match, but if you're using 38 special target ammunition, this revolver would work very well for that. And if you're using it in the field and you wanted the extra power of the 357 Magnum ammunition, this revolver would definitely handle that. One difference with the sights on these, most of the combat Magnums have the ramped front sights, and most of the ones that were manufactured probably from the mid-1960s on have the red ramp in the front sight. Both the Model 19 and the Model 66 both have that. This one does not have the red ramp. Again, this is set up a little bit more in a target configuration to give you that good target, that good sight picture for a little bit more precision target work. Again, I think this is probably the best field revolver of the three, although you could definitely carry the other ones afield. This is the one that's a little bit more set up for that, or a little bit more set up more for target work if you'd like to use it for that purpose. Well, there you have it, folks. That's my Combat Magnum Mania. I hope maybe you got something out of this video that was useful. Hopefully in the not too distant future I can get out to the range, do a little bit of shooting with these, just so you can see how they perform actually being used. And the one thing you can't see from a video, unfortunately, is how much fun they are. Again, the K-frame Magnums, or excuse me, the Combat Magnums rather, were very carryable, very useful firearms. If you are interested in these and you can pick one up used, you're probably going to get it at a pretty good price, and I doubt that you're going to be sorry. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or comments, as always, be sure to leave them below. And until next time, good shooting. Bye-bye.